from the top. I am Michael Phipps, founder of Haiku. Haiku, what is it? Japanese poetry. So I'm not going to even try. I won't do that to you. It's an operating system, the child of BOS. BOS? Well, what's that? And honestly, before some of you were born, so I'm feeling real old up here. This is a screenshot from BOS. And I'll go into a little bit of the history since it was specifically requested. In the 80s, there was a man that was tapped to replace Steve Jobs when they kicked him out of Apple named Jean-Louis Gasset. And I probably mangled the French, but that's okay. He did end up replacing Steve Jobs for a period of time in product development, and then as politics at Apple goes, it's only slightly less interesting than Imperial Rome. He left, let's say. In 1990, he had a pile of money and decided that he wanted to go into competition with his former company, that being Apple, so he founded his own company. They built one of the first real dual processor machines that was sold to the public, called the B-Box. It's a neat box, bad idea. It turns out that trying to produce non-commodity hardware is just not really a good idea so much anymore. And you certainly couldn't compete price-wise. So they ended up dropping that idea and porting to x86 just in time to get steamrolled by Microsoft. Thanks. So they went bankrupt. I said, hey, you know what? Everything else out there is kind of miserable. I'm going to write it myself, and we'll get there. An operating system designed from the ground up for speed. No legacy cruft. So you look at Windows. Windows still has 16-bit calls in a lot of places. They still have 32-bit calls even in the 64-bit world. The whole concept of Haiku is to start from scratch and do it right from the beginning. Right, at least as far as we know today. So B was run out of business by Microsoft. I tried Mac, I tried Linux, I tried Windows. Again, all in 2001. They've all gotten better, so what? I decided to clone BOS. Called it OpenBOS because, well, that just seemed sensible. BOS had a modular design, and the way that worked, their kernel is what they call monolithic. It's one big, think of the monolith from 2001, this big black piece. But in addition to the kernel, they had all these little pieces around it. Printing, for example. Printing doesn't generally need to be like a tight integration with the kernel. So I rewrote the simplest module. Screensaver. Because hey, you can do that in a weekend. And I did. Actually, it took me longer to write this UI to the preferences for the screensaver than it did to write the screensaver itself. Others contributed. There was already a mail kit replacement in process, so that was contributed. A gentleman named Axel Dorfer, and I probably mangled the German this time because I'm equal opportunity like that. Had written some file system tools, and he kind of worked those file system tools into a file system. So he contributed OpenBFS, and suddenly it looked like we were going to make it. Everyone loves a success. You know that the loneliest thing in the world is to start an open source project by yourself, especially one of this kind of a magnitude. And I was very lucky because I got some phenomenal help from just about from the beginning. Not, a month outside of saying, hey, I want to make BOS, remake BOS. I had some phenomenal staff. In fact, Axel is the president of Haiku Incorporated today. We held a contest to change the name for trademark reasons. Essentially, B got bought by Palm. Palm sold it to a company in Japan called Access, who nobody's ever heard of. And they got all the trademarks, and it wasn't in what we considered safe and friendly hands anymore. Access has been nice, but you never know how something like that is going to go. So we decided we're going to change the name. We held a contest, and we came up with Haiku. There's a little bit of a historical precedent to that. The web browser that was in BOS, when they had error messages like 404 page not found, they put Haiku. The guy who wrote the web browser was Japanese, and he put Haiku in like something, page not found, you have failed, your computer is a stone, something along those lines. So this was a nod without possibly infringing anyone's trademark. So what can it do? All the stuff you'd expect. There's no, it's pretty complete. All the general stuff that you expect in an operating system is there. USB, wired and wireless networking, a full UI environment, drivers for the most common hardware. This laptop actually belongs to a friend of mine. I didn't pre-pick it or anything. Haiku boots and runs on it with no problem. I'm running it in VMware. That's a very long story. If you're really that fascinated, see me after. Let's talk about the fun stuff, the stuff you wouldn't expect. Vector-based icons. HVIF is the Haiku Vector Icon Format. One of the problems that we've noticed in other operating systems is that when you scale your desktop, and we've all seen, even over the last 5 years or so, desktops have gotten dramatic increases in resolution. Your icons start to look like garbage. So you either supply 10 icons in 10 different resolutions with your application, or you make them vectors. So this is a screenshot of the applications menu, or the applications folder for a stock Haiku install. Those are all vectored icons. You can scale them up, scale them down, they look just as good. And they actually fit, most of the icon data fits within 2K. So we couldn't use SVG. We couldn't use any of the other vectored formats out there. And we also optimized for small. If you draw these in 1900 by 1200, they don't look so good. We know that you're not going to scale your icons to be ginormous, but for reasonable sizes of scales, it makes sense, it looks good. Replicants. Replicants are so much fun, and they're kind of tough to explain without being too technical. Essentially, every B application or Haiku application has a MIME type. Everybody know MIME types? Good. Every application has a MIME type. You can create a message, it's a programming construct, but you can create a message with a MIME type and save it to disk. When that message is instantiated or clicked on, if you will, it creates that application and embeds it within the application that starts it. So just give you a quick example here. You can see desk help. This is a real application. You can see by the title bar. There's a little handle right here. You click on this handle and drag. You can drag it onto the desktop. If you write your own applications in about 10 lines of code, you can post this. This is network status, same thing. Activity monitor. These are actually individually grabbable, so you can just have CPU usage on your desktop because you can. You can embed that in your own applications. Workspaces, if you're familiar with the Unix workspaces, same kind of deal. Again, you can drag it onto the desktop. The desktop is the most common. We call them shelves for replicants, but there's an application called Be Happy. There are a lot of bee-pun applications. It makes me very sad. But they actually embedded a web browser in the application to be a documentation management system. So they used the web browser to display HTML documentation. Haiku has an interesting and amazingly powerful file system. It's 64-bit. I forget the exact, I want to say 16 exabytes. We haven't cranked it up that far. We've gotten quite a bit of data in there, and it'll go to 16 or so exabytes, but I can't afford that hard drive. Maybe you guys can. It's journaled. What does that mean to you? We test the file system by yanking the power cord out as we're writing. The disk is sitting there spinning, we just yank the power cord out. What that means is that, yes, you'll lose what you were writing, but it won't corrupt the file system. You never have to run check disk. It will just work the next time. And we have attributes. Attributes are slowly coming into more use. You know attributes from Gmail. If you use Gmail, you can tag an email. It's not, you don't put it into a common folder like you do in older email systems. You can have multiple tags. We do the same thing with every single file. So the file name is an attribute. The last created date, the last modified date, the permissions on the file, and a lot more. Because those are sort of the common things. But We have uncommon things. Our whole email system is in attributes. So you have an email, and it's actually the RFC822 is the technical. It's the text of the email is the file. And then you put attributes on the file to say who it's from, who it's to, what the subject is. And that means you can search all of those things with queries. And it's real time. IM, we have an IM kit forthcoming that allows you to, through one interface, talk to your AIM friends and your Yahoo Messenger friends and your Gtalk friends and whatever other. Anybody still use ICQ? Again, I'm showing my age. All of those are supported. So you can search your contacts for an IM status of online. Why would you want to do all this? I mean, it's easier just to look at the window, right? Yes, it is absolutely easier to look at the window. But you want to build an application that looks at IM stuff, you don't have to start from scratch and rebuild everything related to IM. It's all built in, you query. Mail files. So you can do all sorts of interesting mail queries. In fact, the mail system that we use, there is no real there's a tiny application for writing a new email. Every other email, we actually just use the Windows Explorer type, the tracker file system to show your emails. And you can see there's some MP3 similar concepts. I had someone come to me and say, hey, I want to do a catalog of my jazz MP3s. I said, write a query, and there it is. Native development is in C++. That may not sound super appealing to folks who've grown up with Java or .NET or whatever. The reason, you use only the simpler parts of the language for high performance. There's no JVM running, there's no .NET runtime running, it's all straight to the metal. Fastest, smallest executables. And we figure programmers, we love doing this stuff. Why torture the end users with things like the JVM when we don't have to? Kits organize our native components. It's just an organizational tool, really, although some of them are actually in their own shared objects, DLLs for the Windows crowd. So here's a few examples. There's the kernel kit that has all the stuff you would expect, allocate memory, create threads, whatever. The support kit it's kind of our miscellaneous grab bag. The storage kit, format a disk, find a file, write a query, all that good stuff. The media kit shows movies, does music. The interface kit, windows, buttons, sliders, all that good stuff. The translation kit is actually one of the innovations that, see, Haiku doesn't have anything that's like, I gotta have that one thing. But it has like 50 little things that are just really cool, and the translation kit is a great example. The translation kit is a kit where you can say, hey, take the file, I want to see it as an image. And if it's a JPEG, a PNG, it doesn't matter. It loads it, handles it for you, and in your code, one line, you've loaded the image, and you have it as a bitmap that you can alter. Great for programming. It's just amazing how much more productive you are when you don't have to, load libed PNG, libjpeg, libgif, libbmp, all of those. Another thing that's fascinating to me about a Haiku is that every window is its own thread. That if you're not a programmer, the implications of that aren't going to be real obvious to you. The apps are more responsive, even when the system is busy. If you've got an application that's, say, ripping a CD to MP3, that application is doing a lot of work. If you have a dual-core machine, your machine, one of those cores is busy doing that MP3 thing, so why is your display locked up? The reason why is the window is not in its own thread. In Haiku, it's enforced by the operating system. You have no choice. A window is a thread. It makes the programming a little bit tweakier. You have to be careful and either lock the window and call functions, which is kind of the more uncommon, or better, pass messages back and forth.